In his old world, this man was the heavenly demon, the most feared master alive. Then he woke up as the weakest fool of a noble house. The body's true owner had killed himself to dodge a war. All he left behind was a note and a pile of pills. But a demon does not stay buried for long. Roman lunged at the first thug who crossed him. He ripped the blade straight out of the man's hand. Then he cut the gang's leader down. The steel came back dripping red. He tore the whole street crew apart alone. The last man standing just called him a monster. A deadlier man now wears the fool's face. But before all of this, he is just a confused stranger sitting through an old man's story. This is where it all starts. A blacksmith hammers a glowing blade, the best smith this land ever had. He sells his handmade weapons and armor out of one tiny shop. The Cairo Kingdom buys his whole stock of gear for a fortune in gold. That gear carries soldiers through an endless war, lifting his name with it. When the war ends, the crown rewards the smith with a baron's title. That smith becomes lord of this whole land, the father of young master Roman. Right now, an old villager retells that founding story to a bored young noble. Hans the servant frowns, wondering why his master sits through such an old tale. Hours earlier, Roman had pressed Hans to confirm he is the eldest Dimitri's son. He asks if this is really Cairo and whether the world of Murim never existed. Hans says yes, but notes his master has never once acted this strange before. He even guesses the young lord drugged himself, a habit among spoiled nobles. Another servant reminds Roman his fiancée from the Lawrence family visits today. For 25 years, this Roman rotted in his room, the famous moron of Dimitry. Back then, Roman waved off the lady and had Hans bring the oldest person alive here. Hans obeyed, baffled that a man born here suddenly wanted the world explained. Back in the present, the village elder finishes all he knows and clears his throat. Roman thanks him and promises a reward, and the old man feels deeply honored. Sitting quietly, Roman lowers his head and turns the name Roman Dimitry over. The truth is, this body now holds the heavenly demon, a master from the world of Murim. He wonders if waking here is heaven's reward or a punishment for refusing to ascend. A crash outside cuts the thought short, and Roman snaps toward the noise. Out in the open market, a furious shout of bastard rips across the stalls. Across the street, a thug rains punches on a young debtor, snarling at him to die. The market shoppers freeze near the produce stalls, too scared to step closer. Blood drips from the debtor's split mouth as he takes every hit without fighting. A smirking thug stands beside the brute, a bald giant inked with red fangs. Another flurry of blows sends the debtor sprawling across the dusty street. Meanwhile, Hans shoves through the packed crowd, muttering, "Excuse me." Then Hans spots the red fang tattoo on the big thug's arm and goes stiff. Roman asks what is wrong, and Hans only sweats harder, lost for words. Hans turns to him and calls out young master in a low, urgent warning. He says these men belong to Blood Fang, and Roman repeats the name back. Hans explains Blood Fang runs brutal loans here, and the boy owes them big. He wants to pretend they saw nothing, then notices Roman already moving. Roman walks up to the gang and orders them to stop, freezing the blonde thug. Hans chases after him, stammering, while the whole crew turns toward this noble. Roman halts in front of them, perfectly calm, without a flicker of fear. The brute, that bald giant with the fang tattoos, asks if he is Roman Dimitry. A slow grin spreads over the brute's face as the famous name clicks into place. He bursts out laughing, mocking the noble brat for playing hero over a title. His men haul the kneeling debtor up by the hair, calling the debt their business. Hans begs him to leave since Blood Fang plays vicious, but Roman only says Hans. Roman admits he barely knows the local laws, then tells Hans to explain them. He asks who broke the law here and what punishment those crimes should carry. Stunned, Hans watches his clueless master suddenly weigh crimes and sentences. Hans says the boy did break his loan, yet Blood Fang has no right to punish him. Worse, these men disrespected a Dimitry heir, a crime that is worth dying for. Under the territory's own law, Hans admits the gang could face a death sentence. Hans swallows hard, realizing he just handed his master a loaded answer. Roman turns to the gang and tells them flatly they have broken this land's law. He lifts one hand toward the thugs, letting the single word thus hang in the air. Roman names himself the eldest son of Lord Romero Dimitry, here to deliver punishment. The brute scoffs that this clueless noble is dropping Blood Fang into a tight spot. He warns that talking down to men who wear the fang tattoo never ends well. Roman cuts in with a grin, saying that very reaction proves all he needed. The brute blinks, lost, as Roman brands them trash for sneering at their land's master. Roman lunges forward, done talking, his hand shooting toward the nearest thug. He rips a dagger from a thug's grip while the brute screams at them to attack. The brute's grin vanishes as that stolen blade flashes up toward his throat. Roman drives the dagger past the brute's guard before the man can react. The brute's eyes blow wide as the blade streaks by faster than he can track. The brute stumbles past the fruit stall, howling, blood splashing the wall. The dagger drips red in Roman's grip, its edge already finished with the work. Roman looms over the kneeling brute, bloody blade ready, as the man gasps a shaky "you." The rest of the gang screams "bastard" and rushes Roman from every side. Hans cries out for his young master, certain the noble is about to fall. One thug charges in swinging hard, bringing his weapon down on Roman. Roman turns the strike aside, sparks flying, fresh blood streaking his cheek. He twists between two attackers and drops them both before either speaks. A single clean slash tears through the next thug in a burst of red. The brute watches from the ground, stunned, wondering what this noble really is. Bodies keep dropping around Roman, and the gang cannot believe he is the moron. Roman stands in the middle of the carnage, calm, blood streaked on his face. The first thing he saw waking up was a suicide note and scattered pills. A war draft had named this house, and the terrified old Roman killed himself to escape. Whatever pathetic life that Roman led, he is gone, and a deadlier man wears his face. That man once ruled over burning towns as the dreaded leader of the heavenly demon cult. Back in the street, Roman stands over the fallen gang, set on living his own way. A surviving thug stares at his back and chokes out one terrified word: monster. One of them breaks and sprints away, screaming at the top of his lungs. Roman catches him by the hair before he clears 10 steps, and the runner gasps. The thug claws at Roman's wrist, begging him over and over to let go of me. Roman forces him down until both knees buckle into the packed dirt. Roman grips the blade tighter and says he will not be taking the man's life, but he orders the thug to pay a price for running his mouth, and the man shrieks. The thug's eye goes bloodshot and huge as the punishment comes down on him. The thug sags sideways, one arm dripping red, every bit of fight gone. Roman faces the frozen crowd and tells them plainly his name is Roman Dimitry. Then he dares anyone unhappy with the punishment to come find him anytime. The heavenly demon once stood at the very top of Murim, and his power crushed everyone. Thousands of martial artists defied him, and his cult buried every last one of them. But now that same demon stares at his own bloody hand, sick of hunting street rats. 2 Blood Fang thugs lie dead on the stone, killed by a body he barely controls. He calls his servant Hans and tells him to fetch the guards and clear away the corpses. Hans clutches his chest, pale and shaking, and barely manages to say he understands. Roman strolls away from the carnage, certain this new body is hopelessly useless. He frowns at his bloody palm, since it holds almost no Kai and its flow is a mess. Roman clenches his fist and plans to rebuild this weak body, then a shaky voice calls him. The beaten kid thanks him for the rescue, but Roman says he never did it to help anyone. Roman steps closer and tells the kid he only carried out one very simple thing. He punished the Blood Fang bastards for breaking the law, and this kid is no exception. He warns the boy to explain himself without one lie if he wants to keep his tongue. The kid swallows hard, blood on his split lip, and chokes out that he understands. His family borrowed from Blood Fang to buy farmland and planned to repay with their crops. Then the kid's face twists with rage at what those Blood Fang animals pulled instead. The boy stands frozen in the memory, the day he found his whole field wrecked. Smashed corn and crushed vegetables cover the dirt, leaving no way to repay the loan. Later, the kid learned the truth, that the gang did it to get at his younger sister. He yanks against the ropes, shouting that his poor family never troubled a single soul. Then he breaks down, pleading with Roman to at least save his little sister. Roman goes quiet because those desperate eyes drag up an old memory of his. The kid reminds him of the mad demon, one of the dreaded 4 heavenly kings. Roman remembers meeting that mad demon in a rundown place exactly like this one. He asks the kid for his name, and the bruised boy says it is Kevin. Roman heads for the gate and promises to verify the story and handle today's mess. From behind, Kevin shouts a loud thank you at the man who just saved his life. Roman smirks a little, feeling this loud kid might stick around for a long time. Meanwhile, a carriage rolls down the road toward the Dimitry territory. The coachman announces they will reach the estate at any moment now. Inside sits Lady Flora, eyes shut, murmuring that she will meet him soon. 1 month back, Flora hears the news and gasps a shocked pardon in disbelief. The bombshell is a political marriage, arranged with the Dimitry family of all houses. Her father admits their territory is failing, and this match is their only way out. Flora reels, horrified that her whole life is now chained to a clan of crude miners. In her head, the Dimitrys are just hulking miners, swinging pickaxes and grinning wildly. She begs her father to reconsider, but he only says her name with heavy regret. Her father turns away and apologizes that a pathetic man like him made this choice. The carriage finally rolls to a stop, and a voice tells Flora they have arrived. A servant helps Flora down, while she recalls being promised to the promising second son. That plan collapsed when the eldest son suddenly demanded Flora as his own bride. Roman himself turns toward her with a bored hum, dabbing his face with a handkerchief. To Flora, he is the famous moron who lives for luxury and drowns himself in perfume. She steels herself and starts to tell Sir Dimitry exactly what she came here to say. Flora declares she wants this whole political marriage to have never happened at all. Roman lights up and happily agrees, telling her they should absolutely do just that. Flora freezes, her eyes blown wide, able to manage only a stunned little huh. Roman calmly explains the moron of Dimitry is far too low to marry someone like her. Flora sweats, unsure whether this strange man is being completely serious right now. He turns to leave, eager to tell his father at once, until Flora cries out to wait. He looks back at the fallen lady and flatly asks if she actually wants to marry him. Flora stammers out no, so Roman declares the cancellation fully settled between them. He shrugs that being called a divorced man means nothing next to being called a moron. Flora stares after him, totally lost on what is even going on with this guy. Roman strolls off through a tall archway, leaving her to question the rumored moron. Behind heavy doors, his father erupts, demanding to know why the marriage is cancelled. Roman says he settled it with the Lawrence lady, and his father trembles with fury. His father roars that he worked hard for this match to protect their noble standing. He snaps that all Roman had to do was marry the lady, and Roman quietly apologizes. The slap cracks across Roman's face, his father screaming no apology can fix this. His father jabs a finger, warning that the battlefield now waits for Roman in 6 months. Roman flatly says no, so his father mocks the rumor that he beat Blood Fang alone. His father warns even he cannot touch Blood Fang, so the mess is Roman's to carry. He flatly refuses any help and waves Roman off with a sharp dismissive His father smugly waits for the spoiled son to crawl back and beg him in tears. Instead, Roman calmly accepts it and says he will deal with the whole thing himself. His father gapes as Roman owns the trouble and insists it is his alone to clean up. Roman promises to return once everything is handled, leaving his father stammering wait. Calm and unbothered, Roman strides out of the study, his gloves still on the door. In the hallway, he wipes his face again, cool as ever after that whole blow-up. Roman finds Flora still standing there and asks why, while she stares, sure he is insane. Flora warns him that Blood Fang fears nothing and even terrorizes noble families. She says if they feel crossed, the gang will hit back at him with everything they have. Flora urges him to tell the truth and crawl back to beg the Baron for mercy. Roman flatly asks why he should do that, and Flora sputters that she just explained why. With a sigh, Roman cuts her off and calls Lady Flora plain presumptuous, leaving her speechless. Roman stands on the family mansion balcony, coughing, already done with noble life. Hans sprays perfume to hide the blood smell, but Roman grumbles that the stuff reeks. The dress uniform feels far too tight, while Hans fusses over his young master. Hans reminds him this is the first meeting with his fiancée, the Lawrence lady. Marriage, Roman thinks, would only pile more weight on a guy still learning this world. Hans says the guests will arrive soon, and Roman admits the man has a point. Roman sees no reason to insult a woman who never wronged him, so he aims for a clean breakup. Then Flora steps in, and one look tells Roman this lady came carrying an attitude. She never planned to respect him at all, which kills any reason for him to respect her. Roman calls Lady Flora flat out presumptuous, and the word lands hard on her. Roman says she never weighed his side when she pushed to break the engagement, but the second he offered to take full blame, her nerve cracked and she started backpedaling. From the moment the split came up, Roman tells her she had no right over his choice. Flora's eyes well up and the cold words leave her frozen and stung. He tells her they go separate ways now, each minding their own business from here. The two walk out through different doors, since Roman wants nothing more to do with her. He leaves Flora with one line, that this is the first and last time they ever meet. Night falls on the estate, where a woman tells her husband he is drinking too much. She sets down the cup and urges him to stop pouring for the night. The Baron looks at his wife Rihanna and admits he raised his hand against Roman again. Back in their commoner days, he beat the boy often, then swore his kids would never suffer that. Thanks to that promise, the younger children grew up soft, and the Baron nods that it is true. But Roman was the one kid who lived through the hard years, and now the Baron feels lost with him. Rihanna holds him close and tells him to stop blaming himself for falling short as a father. She says only parents can correct a child, and the man she married would never let his son stray. The Baron asks if she means Blood Fang and frets his proud son Swore to face the gang alone. Rihanna suggests sending Knight Captain Jonathan to help, and the Baron agrees at once. The Baron calls for a servant and orders Captain Jonathan summoned right away. Out in the streets, Hans chases after Roman, begging him not to wander around in the open. Hans frets that Blood Fang could strike for revenge anytime, and pleads to head home. Roman asks Hans when Blood Fang first grew so strong, and Hans admits he has no clue. Roman explains the gang built its name by butchering rival crews during a turf war. Fear makes people obey faster, he says, and Hans nervously asks if they stay dangerous. Roman grins that they only stay dangerous as long as they can actually scare him. Inside, a waitress shows them across the cozy dining hall to a seat. She sets down the food they ordered, plates of sausage and fresh greens. Hans lights up at the spread and lets out a delighted little whoa. Roman stands and tells Hans to stay and eat, which leaves the servant baffled. He says he will run the rest of the investigation alone, since it is too risky for Hans. Hans shoots up and refuses, insisting he cannot allow his master to go alone. The servant swears he will come along, even if it drags him straight into danger. Roman leans in close, his eyes steady on the loyal old servant. He asks Hans plainly if he is on his side, and Hans swears that he always is. Then help the right way, Roman says, since tagging along this far already counts for plenty. Roman promises to return soon and walks off, leaving Hans staring after him. Hans never expected such warm words from his master, and they catch him off guard. Then it hits him, and Hans bolts for the door to warn the estate as the room erupts. Alone now, Roman notes the gang is not that strong, but their scattered cells are hard to catch. Nobody wipes them out for fear of the backlash, so the gang floats around untouched. If he cannot track them down, Roman decides he will simply bait them to come to him. He paraded around town with Hans on purpose, so the gang already knows where he is. Better yet, the Dimitry Knights drill today, which thins the guards across the streets. If the gang wants its payback, this quiet hour hands them a perfect opening. Right on cue, a blade slides out of the shadows and a voice says his name. 3 hooded men block the alley, eyes locked on Roman Dimitry. One of them lunges forward with a dagger, screaming, "This is the revenge of Blood Fang." Roman just stands there, back turned, not even bothering to flinch. Slowly, he starts to turn his head toward the charging attacker. Across town, Captain Jonathan looks up as a frantic voice screams for him. Hans sprints up in a panic, and the captain asks what is wrong. Gasping for air, Hans tries to get out that the young master is in trouble. The captain tells him to calm down, while Hans keeps choking on his words. Hans finally blurts that they have to go find Roman immediately. Back in the alley, Roman snaps a hand up and traps the thug's knife arm cold. His attacker's eyes blow wide, and the curse dies halfway in his throat. Roman's bare fingers clamp the blade itself, and the man howls in pain. His fist locks around the steel without a single drop of his own blood. Then he wrenches the arm hard, and blood sprays as the joint gives out. The stolen blade ends up in Roman's hand, while the thug reels back, ruined. From above, the wounded man crumples to the stones, while Roman stands calm. The other 2 freeze, one of them gaping at his fallen partner's bleeding arm. They panic that none of this matches what they were told about the foolish heir. Roman smirks through the blood and asks the pair what they are waiting for. Then he waves them in with the bloody blade and tells them to come get him. The captain stops Hans in the street and asks if Roman really went after Blood Fang alone. The 2 knights just stare at each other in dead silence. Then the captain bursts out laughing and calls it nonsense, since Roman is the weakest kid in the family. Hans gets heated and insists he has no reason to lie about any of this. The captain drops the grin and says there is no time to stand around. He remembers the Baron asking him to step in and clean up Roman's mess with Blood Fang. The captain rubs his head and groans that this whole thing is a real pain. He barks at all his forces to grab their weapons right now. Then he tells Hans to lead the way, since nobody touches the young master on their land. The captain's eyes go sharp as it hits him that the fool really went and did it. Back in the alley, one thug is already down on the stones, clutching a wrecked arm. The other 2 freeze, staring like they cannot believe what they just saw. Roman lifts the bloody blade to his face and grins, his shirt already stained red. The pair snap and scream at him, swinging their daggers in a rage. Both attackers rush him at once, points aimed from either side. Roman slips low and slides past the first swing without a scratch. His violet eyes lock onto the closest man with zero fear. He clamps a hand around the thug's wrist, and the guy howls in pain. The bald one charges in from behind, cursing him out. Roman ducks the long-haired thug's downward stab and twists clear. He rises with the stolen knife as fresh blood sprays through the air. Then Roman drives a kick into the next thug and slams him into the ground. He stands over the fallen men and asks if these 3 were really all of them. The bald thug warns that killing them means trouble, but Roman notes 2 are already dead. Roman grabs the man's bloody fingers and tells him to answer carefully. When the thug stalls, Roman crushes down and the guy screams in agony. Face streaked with blood, Roman leans in and asks who their leader is. Over in the busy part of town, people stroll past the shops without a care. A painted sign hangs above one door, marking a quiet little pub. Inside, the regulars are laughing and knocking back mugs of ale. One guy is mid-story when the opening door pulls his attention. Heavy footsteps cross the floor as a blood-stained figure walks straight in. The bald bartender starts to greet him, then spots the blood and stiffens. Roman gives a calm hello, fresh red splattered all over his white shirt. The regulars whisper to each other, wondering why Roman of all people walked in here. He takes a seat at the bar and orders a 27-year-old Tears of Dawn. The bartender apologizes that they carry nothing that fancy. Roman adds that he has work in the morning and wants the strongest thing they pour. He says he wants to get a little drunk first as 2 patrons watch him from the side. Blood Fang hands out its dirty jobs from inside that very building. Roman squeezes the code out of him, 3 phrases that must be said in order. The room goes still as the gang realizes a stranger just used their private code. In a low voice, one man tells the others to move on him. A hand slides toward a knife hidden under the belt, fingers curling. The order to attack drops, and Roman smashes the closest one square in the head. The rest of the gang flinches, stunned that he moved that fast. Roman whips a kick through the air and catches another man clean. A thug with a fur collar rips out a curved sword and swings for him. The brawl spills into the street as a body crashes down on the stones. Roman's hand shoots out and clamps the fur-collared thug by the throat. He hauls the guy off his feet while the others stand frozen around him. The gang gasps that he dropped 3 of them in a blink. The heavenly demon inside him has been rebuilding this body through martial arts. Even surrounded and alone, Roman looks completely unbothered. He flashes a grin and treats the whole mob like a minor nuisance. Moments later, a limp hand hits the floorboards as the last one folds. Behind the counter, the bartender blinks awake, lost about what just happened. Roman strolls over and says the bartender woke just in time since the work is done. He clamps a hand over the man's mouth and says it is time they had a talk. A while later, the knights push into the trash pub and stop cold at the sight. Bodies lie scattered across the floor with a blade stuck upright in the wood. One of them looks down and asks if their young lord really pulled this off. Another knight rushes to the captain with word from a survivor upstairs. The man gasps that Roman left for Lawrence, where Blood Fang hides its headquarters. 1 hour earlier, Roman stands in a dim pub and tells the owner they should just talk. The bound man's eyes go wide and drip with sweat, deep in pain. Roman's bloody shirt says plenty as he notes the lost fingers. The captive spits that he won't talk, sure Blood Fang will avenge him. Roman just smiles and says the man should have been this stubborn from the start. He grins that the ones who stay silent through torture usually hide the best secrets. The owner sits roped to a chair while Roman looms over him, calm and unbothered. Roman steps to a small stand, ready to test how far that silence really goes. A framed photo sits there showing the owner proudly beside his young son. Roman lifts the picture and asks what the man would do if he hunted that boy down. The owner's eyes snap open in raw terror at the threat. The owner swears the kid is not his son, yet Roman says the boy looks just like him. The owner explodes, screaming that a noble is really using his family as a weapon. Roman says he recently learned an ugly truth about how Blood Fang really works. He explains the members drown in debt and were decent people before they turned cruel. Roman adds that Blood Fang traps people in debt and drags their families into slavery. He taps the photo and asks if his guess about the boy sounds reasonable enough. The owner sweats hard and growls that knowing the truth changes nothing for him. Roman turns to the window and warns the man to be careful where he places his bet. Roman returns and swears on his own name that the threat about the son was real. The fallen photo lies on the floor as Roman promises to send soldiers after the boy. The owner's eyes flood with tears as Roman offers him one final chance. Roman lays out the choice: stay silent and let his son die, or talk and help crush Blood Fang. Inside a small shack with a barred window, a shocked voice asks what just happened. Stone stairs lead down to a sealed door as someone asks if the report is true. A Blood Fang man reports that Roman wiped out the whole branch and the knights are moving. The old boss mutters a curse and refuses to believe a word of it. He sits on his rough throne, fist clenched, certain Roman could never pull this off. The boss grinds his teeth since they meant to crush Dimitry and flaunt their strength. He asks where Roman is, and the man says he barely left Dimitry land after raiding the pub. The boss snarls that the brat looks down on them and orders every fighter gathered now. The men shout yes sir while he vows to kill Roman before the knights ever arrive. The boss's eye narrows as he swears to slaughter Roman and hang his corpse over the plaza. Far away, a grand mansion rises as someone asks what the Barco family is plotting. A hand holds a scroll and a voice warns the Barcos took a huge loan to prepare for war. Nobles around a long table agree they must raise their forces faster than the enemy. A blonde lord rests his clasped hands against his face and stays quiet for a long beat. He finally admits war feels unavoidable after the strange document the Barcos sent him. Two of his men complain that the central government now openly backs the Barcos. An older noble slams the table, shouting their Lawrence land is all that keeps them alive. Another waves a note claiming their ancestors pledged the land, and a voice calls it fake. The Lord raises a hand for quiet and insists they can never hand the land away. A gray-haired man clasps the Lord's hand and says they must resist the Barcos fully. The Lawrence Lord agrees, then admits that is why he arranged the Dimitry marriage. The men perk up, remembering the Dimitrys are one of the richest houses around. The Lord sighs that he handed his daughter to the so-called fool of the Dimitry family. One noble lifts a hand and tells the Lord he chose right and should not blame himself. Behind tall golden doors, a soft voice answers with a reluctant "all right." Flora lets out a heavy sigh, wondering how she will ever break the news. She frets that she cannot face her father now that the engagement is off. Flora paces back and forth, refusing to be sold to a stranger, then braces herself to tell him. She marches down the hall just as a man comes running and calls out for his lord. Flora turns with a puzzled as the man shouts for the lord again. A kneeling knight greets her politely as Miss Flora, and she answers back unsure. Her whole face freezes when the knight blurts that there is an emergency. Outside a gate, guards order a frantic man to drop his weapons as he screams Roman is in danger. Mounted knights wait as a guard rushes the captain with word of serious trouble. The frantic man hears the Lawrence Plaza is in chaos and threatens to smash the gate down. Over at that plaza, a scream tears through the air above the rooftops. Townspeople recoil as blood runs down a wall and nobody understands what they see. The old Blood Fang boss, bloodied and broken, begs to at least keep his own life. Roman calmly drags the ruined boss across the plaza, while half the town panics that he might be the one in danger. Back inside the wrecked headquarters, the boss tells himself the job should have been simple. He had written the noble off as a fool, an easy mark his blades would handle quick. One lone enemy against dozens of his armed men felt like no work at all. The boss was certain there was no way his crew could lose this fight. Then his eyes blow wide because it was never supposed to end like this. He kneels in the blood with his own men sprawled dead all around him. His stare locks open, a fresh cut running straight down his face. A shaking hand drags across the wet floor as the panic finally lands. A single figure stands over the corpses while the boss sinks to his knees. The same thought keeps pounding him, that at this rate he is going to die. He chokes out a tiny no, begging that he really does not want to die. Tears flood his eyes as he sobs for them to please spare his life. Out in the town square, Roman drags the old man forward by his hair. The boss keeps pleading into the stones while Roman never breaks his stride. Roman cracks a hard blow across him and blood sprays onto the pavement. The townsfolk watch frozen while the beaten man bows low at Roman's feet. The boss swears he will become a dog and serve Roman for the rest of his life. Roman smirks down and repeats the word dog, clearly liking how it sounds. Then Roman drives the final hit and the old man's skull bursts open red. Roman turns to the crowd and names the dead man the leader of Blood Fang. He reminds them how the gang crushed people into debt and even tried to kill him. Roman tells the whole square that the crimes of Blood Fang are out in the open. Standing over the body, he vows to pull the root of this evil clean out. The crowd gasps as armored riders come charging into the square. One knight stares in raw shock at what his young master just did. Fresh blood runs down the wall and nobody in the square dares to move. Over at the Lawrence Manor, the nobles confirm they let Roman onto their land. They allowed it only because he is set to marry the Viscount's daughter Flora. But within an hour, Roman dragged a man out and executed Ben Miles in public. The Viscount cannot believe the fool Roman Dimitry actually pulled this off. His nobles snap that Roman killed a man without the Lord's permission at all. The Viscount waves it off, since permission is not the thing that matters here. He orders them to summon Roman so he can hear the story straight from him. Roman strides in flanked by two of his Dimitry knights, calm as ever. At his side walks the red-bearded knight captain, a man named Jonathan. Inside the office, Roman gives the Viscount a short and flat greeting. The Viscount drops the formalities and asks why he came all this way to kill so brutally. Roman says days ago, Blood Fang was beating an innocent Dimitry citizen bloody. Outside the doors, Flora hears his voice and stops dead in the hallway. She grabs a young knight passing by and pulls him quietly aside. The young knight turns, startled, and asks his lady what she needs. Flora asks why Roman is here and why he walked into her father's office. The knight says it looks like she has not heard the news yet, and she just blinks. Back inside, Roman finishes that he stormed the gang's base and killed their leader. Then Roman flips it and asks the Viscount if he truly did anything wrong. The aide admits Ben Miles was notorious, but nobody knew he ran Blood Fang. The Viscount backs down and admits this mess grew from Lawrence ignoring it. He promises Roman a reward soon and sends him off, and Roman simply nods. Alone at the long table, the Viscount and his aide sit in the quiet. The aide says "my lord," and the Viscount bursts into a booming laugh. The Viscount strokes his beard and admits the kid really got him good. The aide insists they cannot let it slide, but the Viscount calls Roman perfect for Flora. Eyes shut and grinning, the Viscount says he is honestly very happy about it. Over the Sunset Hills, he orders someone to bring Flora so he can tell her everything. Jonathan pulls up beside him and asks if he truly had to taunt the Viscount. Roman answers flat that Lawrence was partly to blame for this whole incident. Jonathan gulps as Roman adds the Viscount would never punish his daughter's fiancée. The captain stares at Roman's back and wonders what on earth happened to him. The man riding ahead of him is simply not the young master Jonathan once knew. This is Roman's very first life, a white-haired kid kneeling alone in a freezing stone pit. High above the pit looms his father, the heavenly demon, staring coldly down at him. The demon says one dead child out of 12 means nothing. He can always make more. That whole lesson is brutal and simple. Worth only comes from ruling over everyone. Around the boy, a ring of older children kneel and snicker at the small new arrival. A sudden blow cracks across his head and blood sprays out into the dark. A bigger boy laughs over him, mocking the so-called son of the heavenly demon. Roman snaps and lunges up at him, eyes burning and teeth bared in raw fury. But another fist slams into his jaw and snaps his head hard to the side. Two kids in the back only watch, and one of them calls him a total dumbass. One more punch drops him, while his grown voice says most kids grow up shielded by parents. His own fist tightens in the dirt as the memory pushes toward a breaking point. Then one last hit rocks his face and the entire childhood flashes apart. Now we sit in the present on a grand mansion lit up against a dark night sky. Inside, a long hallway stretches past tall mirrors and deep crimson walls. Water sloshes over a big stone tub as someone lowers into a steaming bath. It turns out to be Roman himself, sinking down with one long, tired sigh. The deadliest demon alive just got worn out by one plain day in this soft new body. He leans back and thinks over all the chaos he has caused since waking up here. And almost all of that mess, he admits, traces straight back to the Blood Fang gang. To wipe that gang out, he tore through anything that ever stood in his way. Roman sits up and swears he feels no regret. He still crushes whoever blocks his path. Still, he knows going that loud was risky since his strength dropped in this weaker body. He leans back, wondering what to do next, when a servant calls for the young master. The servant says the Lord himself is asking for him and wants him there soon. Roman calls back that he understands and will head to his father shortly. Over in the study, a ringed hand raps twice against a heavy wooden door. The Baron looks up surprised and asks if Roman truly pulled all of that off. Jonathan nods that the young master is just not the same man they once knew. To the Baron, Roman is the odd one out, the least gifted of his three sons. He is also the only child who lived through the Baron's broke commoner years. This is a softer memory, the Baron's own little boy running up with a candy. The young father blinks at the tiny wrapped sweet and asks what it even is. The dad crouches at his rough work site and asks why his kid walked all this way. The boy beams and says dad works all day, so the sweet should hurry him home. The father just stares, stunned, and right then he only wanted Roman happy. Back in the present, the Baron admits that memory is why he favored Roman. He handed the boy huge allowances so nobody could mock him for being poor, but he confesses the spoiling backfired and he had quietly given up on his son. Now, hearing Roman wiped out Blood Fang, the Baron feels real hope come back. Right then, Jonathan announces at the door that Roman himself has finally arrived. The Baron waves him in, hoping the kid truly earned this victory on his own. Roman walks in calm and quiet as his father silently vows to do right by him. The Baron leans in with his hands clasped tight and warmly greets his son. He asks straight out if Roman really brought the Blood Fang gang down by himself. Those sharp eyes study the Baron and catch the heavy hope behind that question. Roman knows the full truth would make his father view him in a whole new light, but a win this big draws dangerous attention, so staying quiet could buy time to grow. The safe, smart move is to hide it, and Roman is, of course, not going to do that. The old memory floods back instead, with young Roman eating a vicious punch. The bully laughs down at him, sneering that this is all the famous kid has got. But down in the dirt, his small hand closes tight around a loose, jagged stone. He swings that rock up and cracks it hard straight into the bully's skull. The bully screams and reels back, blood bursting out the side of his face. Roman drives him flat to the ground and keeps swinging that rock without pause. His eyes flare wild and red while pure rage takes him over completely. He pins the bully under him and lifts the bloody rock high for a final blow. The rock comes down over and over, dripping red across his small fingers. The other kids freeze and shriek, backing away from the blood-soaked boy. Roman crouches alone over him, chest heaving, hands still shaking from the rush. Around him, the rest of the children shrink back, too scared to take one step. Roman stands tall and tells them to carry a message deep into that cave. With a wild grin, he says the one who crushed their boss is standing right here. Back in the study, present Roman smiles and admits yes, he tore Blood Fang apart. He can't hide what he is because the heavenly demon was never built to stay quiet. The Dimitry castle sits quiet under a wide morning sky, its towers stretching high. Down in the yard, two wooden practice swords crack hard against each other. Recruits drill all across the training ground, trading swings in steady pairs. An instructor lifts his voice and orders every recruit to halt the drills at once. A heavy boot steps onto the stone, and the whole yard turns toward the sound. The Baron walks in, a huge bearded man, as a voice barks for respect to the Lord. The entire crowd of recruits bows together and greets their lord as one. Off to the side, the Vice Captain Chris turns his head toward the gate. His green eyes narrow, because the figure at the entrance throws him off. It is Roman, and the recruits whisper, asking why the young master came here. A pair of boots presses on the tiles, planted steady and completely unbothered. Nearby, the knight captain watches the young master with a cold, flat stare. A voice announces a swordsmanship duel will now be held against young Master Roman. Whoever wants to face him is told to step forward and claim the match. The recruits trade nervous looks, sweat beading, not one of them moving an inch. Chris frowns and mutters, wondering what this whole thing is even about. A recruit scoffs at dueling the family moron, while Roman just stands there calm. An hour earlier, inside the study, Roman calmly admits that yes, it was him. A faint smile sits on his face, steady and sure, without a flicker of doubt. The Baron leans in, sweating, and asks how he brought Blood Fang down. Roman knows he must answer without raising suspicion, so he claims he trained in secret. The Baron asks why he hid it, swearing he would have backed his son gladly. Roman says he was done being pampered and wanted the family fool to stand alone. He figured the gang would fall apart once its leader dropped, so he lured out the boss, Ben Miles. Stunned, the Baron repeats it, and Roman says the gang always hunted weak nobles, so he became the bait. The knight captain jolts up, warning it was reckless, that they could have killed him instead. Roman counters that men ruled by fear never die for their boss, and that is just what happened. The study falls silent as the Baron takes in the whole picture of his son's work. The Baron calls it sharp planning, backed by real nerve, saying impressive barely covers it. Then he asks one favor of his son, that he wants to see this swordsmanship himself. Roman stands tall in the light, while the Baron aches to learn how far he has changed. The Baron's eyes go wide with hope, almost desperate to witness the change. Out on the training field, the call for volunteers goes out, and the recruits squirm in silence. Chris sneers inside, since winning earns nothing, and losing this clown show gets you tossed. The captain decides a real expert must handle the young master, and warns he will pick one. He would take it himself, but his rank forbids it, so his eyes find the one man who fits. One name cuts the air, Chris, and the blonde vice captain freezes on the spot. Told to come forward, Chris stammers a shaky pardon, sure that he misheard. Chris remembers meeting Roman a year back, riding in on patrol over a drunk causing trouble. Inside a tavern, the old Roman was raging drunk, screaming at everyone near him. He howled that they dared treat him like trash over one small shove. The terrified owner and his wife begged forgiveness while he threatened to shut the place down. The spoiled brat only screamed back at them to shut their mouths. He smashed the tables apart, snarling that lowlifes had no right to talk back. Then he jabbed a finger and ordered the owner to come closer again. A guard begged him to calm down, but he cursed and demanded they obey on command. Chris stepped in and pinned his arms, telling the young master that was enough. Any more trouble, he warned, would cost the brat dearly, young master or not. In answer, Roman shrieked straight into his face, spit flying with the rage. Roman raged that lowly knights dared lay hands on him as a guard pleaded. A slap cracked across Chris, and from that sting he knew the brat never trained a day. The weak grip told Chris this was a soft below average man, and he found it pathetic. Chris could barely believe trash like this was the Lord's true son. Back then he had written Roman off as better left for dead, and now he must duel that same man. The memory breaks, and Chris hears his name again as his stomach drops. He tells the captain he should not be the one, but the captain calls a Blood Fang slayer worthy of a fair match. Chris tries to argue once more, yet the captain cuts him off with one flat word. Jaw tight, Chris finally gives in and accepts the order to fight. The two square off on the wide stone arena, wooden swords ready, a crowd watching. Chris locks a hard glare on the young master, his blood already heating for the bout. Roman only studies him back, loose and easy, like none of this worries him at all. The captain raises a hand to pause them, and Chris says he has a proposal. Asked what he means, Chris answers that he treats any sword duel as a real fight with no mercy. If allowed, he will gladly fight, sure the fool never beat Blood Fang, eager to teach a lesson. The Baron and the captain trade a glance, weighing whether to permit such a brutal match. Roman waits in the open, the Baron behind him with arms crossed and watching close. A small smirk crosses Roman's mouth, and Chris snaps, asking if he is laughing. The smirk reads as a yes, and fury floods Chris, his neck cording tight with it. The captain calls both sides to ready themselves for the opening clash. Chris slides 1 foot back and sinks low into a fighting stance on the tiles. Across from him, a boot grinds forward as the other fighter sets his footing. Chris lifts his gaze, every muscle wound tight for the very first strike. His green eye sharpens to a fine point, fixed dead on the young master. Roman's calm purple eye meets it without a flinch, just as the captain shouts begin. The captain lifts his voice across the yard and tells both fighters to get ready. Chris plants one boot on the cracked stone and slides into his opening stance. Roman sets his own foot down across from him, loose and completely unbothered. Chris turns his head toward the young master with a faint, hungry smirk. Roman looks straight back at him, his face flat, not a trace of nerves on it. Chris narrows his green eye and winds every muscle tight for the first move. Roman's purple eye answers it, steady and cold, like the duel is already settled. The call to begin rings out, and Chris drives off the line in a burst of dust. He lunges in first and brings his wooden sword down at the young master hard. Roman's purple eyes track the falling blade without a single flinch or step back. Chris pours his whole weight into that downward cut, sure it will land clean. Two recruits gasp that the kid is fast and that Chris is going all out already. The captain leans in, stunned, muttering that the young master just blocked it. Roman has caught the heavy cut clean on his own wooden sword and holds it there. Chris stares down at the block, refusing to believe what his eyes are showing him. He feels the force of that clash punch straight back through both of his hands. The stance holds firm, steady from every angle he quietly tests it from. Chris wonders if this clean defense is nothing more than dumb beginner's luck. Chris decides it makes no difference that he read the young master so wrong. He grins wide and swears the only thing he wants is to beat Roman to a pulp. Their wooden swords crash together again over the open tiles of the arena. Chris glares through the locked blades, his eyes burning with real heat now. Both swords grind and throw sparks as the two of them press in chest to chest. Roman keeps his face calm even as the wood groans and creaks under the pressure. The kid shoves him back and Chris skids off hard to one side of the ring. A wide grin splits across Chris's face as he tells himself this is the moment. He throws both arms open for a huge swing, and Roman drops in low under his guard. Roman's face sharpens as he commits fully to the counter he has been waiting for. A boot scrapes the tiles as Chris is forced to slide back off his own attack. The counter clips Chris across the body and rocks him clean off his balance. Chris reels backward, hair flying loose, sweat already breaking across his face. Roman stands tall on the tiles while Chris drops low, scrambling with his sword. A heavy boot settles back down onto the cracked stone as the exchange ends. Chris admits to himself that the swing just now could have truly ended him. The Baron and the captain both freeze, calling the whole thing flat impossible. The recruits stammer that the so-called family fool almost dropped a real knight. The same burning question keeps eating at Chris about where this skill came from. Roman just stands there, lacking nothing in his defense or in his attack. Chris grits his teeth and asks if the kid really wrecked Blood Fang on his own. He snaps out of it, refusing to lose to the Dimitry fool in front of this crowd. Roman opens his eyes at last and calls everything up to now nothing but a warm-up. The word lands and stops Chris cold, while Roman calmly says that this time. Roman tells him plainly that he is the one going on the attack first now. Chris's green eye snaps wide as the meaning of that line finally hits him. Roman is already on top of him, and Chris barely throws a guard up in time. Chris reels under it, shouting that nobody should be able to move this fast. A boot skids across the tiles as Chris is shoved onto the back foot now. Roman keeps driving forward, his face set hard and locked onto his target. The heavy blows keep slamming down and buckle Chris a little lower each time. The recruits gape at how brutally fierce the young master's attacks have turned. Chris curses, barely holding a guard up against the constant heavy strikes. Both their eyes lock in close, and Chris hunts hard for a single opening. Chris whips his wooden sword around in one wide, desperate arc at the kid. He commits everything to that swing, throwing his whole side into the motion. His eyes blow wide as he understands far too late that he should have stepped back. Roman closes the gap fast, already reading how wide that swing left him open. The kid hauls his sword up high overhead and winds the whole strike back. He spots every gap that the reckless swing just tore wide open in the guard. Chris jerks his blade up fast, trying to cover the openings he left behind. His green eye snaps as the trap dawns on him a full beat too late to fix. Chris sees it now, that Roman baited him into that reckless overswing on purpose. Chris lunges in anyway, but Roman has already trapped him with nowhere to go. Roman's mouth curls as Chris admits, stunned, that he is the one about to lose. Then Chris pours raw aura straight down his arm and it ignites in a blue blaze. The captain bolts upright and screams at Chris to stop before he goes too far. Chris ignores the order completely as his 1-star aura roars fully to life. Roman's eyes finally widen, the first real surprise out of him this whole match. The loaded aura and the wooden sword collide in one blinding, deafening burst. Two recruits grab onto each other, yelling to know what just happened out there. The Baron lurches forward through the smoke, shouting over and over for his son. Roman lets out a slow breath, standing untouched as the dust finally settles. He had slipped clean under the strike, the spent aura blade dying out behind him. Chris freezes, a small awe slipping out as the loss finally sinks all the way in. Roman's counter launches Chris clean off his feet and sends his sword flying away. The Baron and the captain jolt upright together, their eyes blown completely wide. The recruits go stiff as Roman stands tall over the fallen vice-captain. Roman looks past them all, calm, while every eye in the yard asks what he truly is. All over the castle, people keep asking what the new Vice Knight captain is like. The answer comes quick. He is the captain's top pupil, and he started this young. Two knights add that even at his age, the boy already reached 2-star aura. Back in training, his sparring was brutal, wooden swords cracking without a pause. At a table, a man swears it took the boy just 3.5 years to hit 1 star. And the rumor everyone repeats is that his sword skill is flat out incredible. An old regular leans in and asks the one thing nobody mentioned yet, his name. The yard shows a heavy boot stepping in over a fallen wooden practice sword. The captain stands tall while his young pupil kneels, gasping and wrecked from drills. The captain calls the session there and at last drops the name. Chris. Young Chris hunches over his blade, soaked in sweat, barely pulling in air. He forces out that he is fine, both legs trembling under him on the stone. Then he pushes back up, levels his sword, and begs for one more round. The captain notes Chris pairs raw talent with a punishing work ethic. Watching him grind that hard, the captain quietly calls this boy a true genius. One more clash, and the captain's wooden sword launches Chris across the yard. Now 2 grown knights stand frozen, jaws tight, doubting their own eyes. 2 younger men stare as well, mouths hanging open at what just played out. Because Roman stands there with his sword raised, and Chris is the one going down. Roman's face stays flat, not a single crack, like none of this shook him. The view pulls wide over the gray castle walls under an open sky. Down on the stone, Chris lies flat, knocked out, as a voice calls for the captain. The Baron and the captain freeze, their prized 2-star knight beaten by the fool. The captain's mind spins because this skill is not 1 or 2 years of effort. He leans to the Baron and warns him not to be shocked by what they watched. Over the fallen Chris, he says it plainly, the young master is a sword genius. Roman barely listens. He studies Chris on the ground and quietly sizes him up. Chris lies there beaten, and Roman runs the whole fight back inside his head. He admits the guy knows how to press an opponent with sharp focus under pressure. By this world's measure, Chris is skilled, enough to take the Blood Fang gang alone. But by Roman's measure, Chris is the worst. Even his old cult's weakest hit harder. One thing did catch him. That blue power Chris flared up at the very end. Off to the side, the Baron watches, and a low laugh starts climbing in his chest. Then it bursts loose, the Baron roaring with laughter across the whole training yard. Over Roman's calm eyes, the Baron's voice booms that this is a pure pleasure. The Baron grins ear to ear, shouting that his son is a real swordsmanship genius. He turns to the captain for proof, and the captain nods that nothing else explains it. Satisfied, the Baron chuckles low and admits he finally sees it now. He calls his son over, and Roman steps in closer at the word. The Baron says he has not felt this happy in years, and wants to reward the win. Arms crossed and beaming, he tells Roman to name anything he could want. A slow grin tugs at Roman's mouth because his answer is already locked in. Roman notes he ships out in half a year, and the Baron asks if he wants out of it. Roman says no, and asks instead to pick the men who will march beside him. The Baron blinks, thrown, and floats, just mending that broken Lawrence engagement. Roman cuts him off with one word, father, and says flatly that he is going. His face is set hard, no room left to argue, locked on the front line ahead. The Baron stalls a beat, caught off guard by how firm his son has turned. Then he gives in, letting Roman choose his own men and anything else he needs. He tacks on one request, saying while Roman keeps this up, he will not refuse him. Roman's eyes slide sideways with a small smirk as he starts to answer, then, and his gaze settles right on Chris, still out cold on the cracked stone. In a sick room, a bandaged Chris erupts. Teach aura to the young master? The captain stands over him and lays it out plainly. This came as the Lord's order. Chris snaps that it is too much and points at the wreck that moron made of him. Even with aura, he got countered and knocked out cold, and the shame eats at him. He calls teaching Roman a bridge too far, then the captain offers him a deal. Teach Roman and dig out how he got so strong, and the secret technique is his. Chris bolts upright, eyes blown wide, asking if the captain is truly serious. The captain answers yes, dead flat, and Chris starts running the numbers fast. That technique is the captain's path to 3-star aura, and Chris wants it badly. He grinds his teeth, mutters a curse, then warns the captain to keep his word. Over in Roman's room, an attendant brings up how amazing the duel looked today. A servant eases Roman into a red robe while the castle gossip keeps spreading. The attendant marvels that the family fool just downed a full 2-star aura knight. Roman echoes the words 2-star aura, then asks Hans if he even knows what aura is. Hans hesitates, unsure himself, and guesses it is the power to use mana. Mana, Roman repeats, so that is the local name. His mind jumps to Chris's flare. That glowing surge Chris let loose was, without a doubt, a raw burst of ki. But these people spend ki nothing like Murim, and to Roman, it looks like pure waste. He stands at the window, unable to grasp why anyone would throw ki away so loosely. He decides to study it up close, and a sly smile says training tomorrow gets fun. Meanwhile, Chris rubs his head with a grin, worried he got too excited back there. The training yard is quiet, Chris and Roman standing a few steps apart on the grass. Chris steps close, a fresh bandage on his cheek from yesterday's beating. Roman watches him with a flat, calm face and says nothing yet. Chris catches the faint smirk on Roman, and his head screams, "This little brat." He breathes out, swallows the anger, and says he will first explain what aura is. Aura is one branch of mana, the exact form that knights pull out and use. Magicians lock their mana away inside spinning circles deep in their core. Knights take the other road and push that mana all through their body instead. The man who first cracked this open was an old ruler named Emperor Alexandro. Spreading mana across the body strengthens it, and a fast release becomes aura. That instant release lets a knight strike far harder than a normal swing. Chris waves the history off, saying the backstory does not really matter much. Barely anyone can even sense mana, and just 1 in 1,000 ever becomes a knight. Chris says sensing mana took him half a year, and within a year already beats average. Roman nods and asks him to explain how he first sensed it. Chris happily agrees. Behind that grin, Chris is plotting, sure, Roman is just puffed up from one win. Roman folds his arms while Chris silently vows to make this training brutal. But the lesson is already pointless, since Roman has pooled this mana in his Dantian. Trusting their common sense blindly is wrong, yet he wants to watch how they do it. Chris tells him to focus on his breathing and feel everything touching his skin. Once he can move mana, Chris says, he squeezes it down into one single point. Do that correctly and you become a 1-star aura knight, the very first rung. From there you can wrap your blade in aura to make every cut bite deeper. Or you coat your own body with it, Chris adds, eyes shut, missing the heat. He promises a short burst of power, then his eyes open and the words die out. Roman stands wrapped in roaring aura, and Chris chokes that there is no way. Chris keeps staring, sweat running, mouth stuck on a word he can barely begin. The family fool is manifesting full aura in front of him on the very first try. That glow crawls up Roman's red sleeve and shoulder, steady and under control. Roman smirks that he knew it. Sure, this world's way with ki is pure garbage. In Murim, a cultivator packs ki into the Dantian, but here mana just drifts loose. Murim ki runs thin but heavy, while this mana floods in light and leaks back out. He rolls a small flame on his palm, calling their way far weaker than Murim's arts. Dumping mana in every direction at once just wastes most of it, Roman points out. With a method this leaky, he would never reach the peak in a century. Chris freezes. Chris stammers, asking how Roman did that and whether it really was aura just now. Roman says he should know already, and Chris snaps that releasing aura took years. Chris erupts for the truth. Sure, Roman faked being clueless about mana all along. Now the loss finally adds up, and he asks why Roman buried this power 2 years back. Roman says he is inventing his own story, while Chris insists nothing else fits. Then Roman just bursts out laughing right in the middle of Chris ranting at him. Chris demands to know what is so funny, and Roman tells him plainly that it just is. The fist at his side trembles as Chris asks if Roman finds his effort a joke. Roman turns it around, asking if Chris ever once doubted his training while climbing. The question lands hard, and Chris just stares, caught without any answer. Roman says people wrongly trust that any method handed down for ages must be right. While taking those aura lessons, Roman kept turning one quiet thought over and over. Why did everyone cling to this drill when its flaw sat right there in plain sight? Maybe their faith in Captain Jonathan ran too deep, or maybe following felt easier. Anyone copying a proven method avoids blame, yet Chris never once questioned his. No answer in this world is perfect, and even his drill began from an old question. Chasing those questions, Roman admits, can drag a whole life into deep suffering. After countless failed tries, you face the scorn of others and your own despair. Still, he chose change, ditching his father's art to build his own, then calls it done. Chris's mouth falls open, one shaky word slipping out as he tries to stop him. Roman halts mid-turn and glances back over his shoulder at the stunned knight. Chris plants himself and asks him straight, please, to just tell him the way. The words drag Roman back to blood on stone and a beaten rival begging for the way. Sprawled across the rocks, the rival lies still with his sword fallen in the blood. The heavenly demon asks if he plans to keep struggling, and the rival admits his loss. Then the rival pledges his blood demon cult to the heavenly demon and begs him to wait. Two blades rest in the dirt while the rival swears he never met anyone this strong. Kneeling low, the rival offers his whole body, certain both of them gain if he grows. Head snapping up, the rival roars at the heavenly demon to just tell him already. The memory snaps to Chris, throwing that same desperate question at Roman's face. Roman notes the proud knight just dropped every last scrap of pride to ask him. A slow grin tugs at the corner of Roman's mouth as he quietly weighs the kid. He leans in with a sharp smile and calls the whole thing interesting, eyes on Chris. The blood demon pulled every scattered blood demon cult together and rose as their leader. He ranked among the Murim's top masters, so clashing with the heavenly demon was inevitable. At the end of that long war, the heavenly demon cut him down, and the proud demon lost. That old memory surfaces because Chris just swallowed his pride and came asking Roman for lessons. Chris wants strength enough to toss his pride aside, much like the old blood demon once did. Roman grins, calls it interesting, then refuses to simply hand over a way to grow stronger. Chris asks what he should do, since Roman just warned against blindly following old methods. Roman says a handed answer would change nothing, so he tells Chris to stay at his side instead. Chris freezes as Roman drops the real news, that in 6 months he leaves for the battlefield. Roman tells him to watch how he beats countless foes, and 10 years in, the answer will come. Chris stands with his back turned, the whole offer still sinking in. Through a tall window, that same cold sky hangs over Chris's room. Chris sits on the edge of his bed, wide awake and unable to sleep. He drags a hand down his tired face, the bandage still stuck to his cheek. His mind slips back to his early days, when sensing mana was the first goal they set him. Half a year in, he could already feel it, and the older knights called that pace unreal. 3 years later, he manifested aura, and they flatly told him he was a genius. Back then, the captain told him that made him a real 2-star aura knight, but Roman's words keep echoing, that he never questioned the method, and Chris can barely speak. By next morning, the Grey Castle keeps stands under a heavy clouded sky. Inside, the captain sits stunned at his desk and asks Chris what he just said. Chris repeats it plainly that he will follow the young master onto the battlefield. He nearly shouts that he wants to get stronger, and the captain quietly senses a real shift in him. Chris holds his ground, his green eyes steady and his jaw locked tight. The captain studies him back, weighing the boy he raised with one careful look. At last, the captain gives in, saying a solid reason clearly pushed Chris toward this choice. He tells Chris he is no longer a Dimitry knight and hopes he guards the young master on the way. Chris thanks him quietly, the words catching hard in his throat. The captain says he understands, then murmurs that Chris is no longer who he once was. A memory hits him from years back, when the captain stood in bloody armor over a wrecked field. In the rubble, a small blonde boy crawled toward a fallen woman as blood soaked the stone. That boy was Chris, once sobbing over his dead mother in the middle of a battlefield. Back in the office, the captain dips his head, certain that Chris, who follows Roman, is no fool. The captain tells him to come along and start preparing, leaving Chris blinking in confusion. Survival on the battlefield, the captain says, means owning a secret weapon all your own. Chris's eyes light up at that, and he fires back a sharp "Yes, master!" Down in a busy market town, stalls and loud chatter fill the whole square. A hand slaps a table as one man asks if the others caught the latest rumor going around. The rumor says Roman wiped out Blood Fang, which the men mock as crazy for a useless noble. One admits the accounts sound too real, while another blames the Dimitry Knights for staging it. A young worker named Kevin goes stiff, the talk dragging him into a sharp memory. In his head, Roman cut clean through that entire gang with barely a twig in his hand. Kevin wonders if Roman did it to keep an old promise, then quickly tells himself no. He figures no noble would go that far for him, yet the loan sharks really did vanish. A coworker barks at Kevin to finish cleaning if he wants to go home, and he snaps awake. Heading home under the sunset, Kevin admits he wants to become someone like Roman. He craves real strength to shield his family, since men like Blood Fang still fill the world, but he has no clue how to grow stronger, and meeting Roman again feels almost impossible. Right then, a voice calls his name, and Kevin lifts his head toward it. His eye blows wide, catching a sight he can barely believe. A crate of potatoes spills from his arms as he blurts out the words, "Young Master." Roman stands there relaxed as ever and tells him it has been a while. Kevin stammers, asking what brings him here, then cuts himself off mid-sentence. He drops to the ground and thanks Roman, crediting him with his family's survival. Roman asks if he is well, and Kevin says Blood Fang backed off and Mr. Hans found him work. Kevin says he can never repay him, and Roman hints his proposal could be that chance. A proposal, Kevin repeats, as Roman vows his family will never struggle for a living again. Roman lays out a warm home and good food waiting for them, then swears he can make that life real. Then comes the catch, that Kevin must live for him and pledge loyalty in return for a brand new life. Kevin's eyes lock onto Roman as the offer lands with full weight. His mouth tightens and his whole body begins to move on its own. Kevin slams his forehead to the stone and pledges his life, ready to die on command. And if Roman ever orders a kill, he swears he will cut down whoever it may be. Forehead bleeding, Kevin says protecting his family is already far more than enough for him. Roman watches that bloody devotion and thinks this kid mirrors the old Mad Demon. The Mad Demon once charged hundreds of the White faction without one step back on a single order. Kevin only crossed his mind because Chris had first reminded Roman of the Blood Demon. Roman grins, calls the trip worth it, and claims Kevin as his from this point on. Roman walks his new recruit Kevin up to the Dimitry estate under a wide, bright sky. He hands Kevin to Hans, the mustached steward, and asks him to help the kid settle in. Roman promises to swing by and visit later, and the redhead lights right up at that. Kevin thanks him for everything, and Roman says he'll be in the estate library if needed. Hans offers to show Kevin around, and the new kid can barely believe his luck. Inside, the library is huge, shelves of books climbing all the way up the walls. Roman settles at a desk piled with old volumes, a candelabra burning beside the pages. He digs into Aura Knights, the warriors here, learning exactly exactly how their ranks work. Manifesting aura makes you a 1-star knight, cutting through steel makes you 2-star. Aura strength sets your rank, and 3-star fighters pass normal human limits. A 3-star knight earns special treatment across the kingdom, almost like royalty. On the Salamander continent sits one 6-star knight, and nobody alive has hit 7. Even among the top 10 ranked knights, not all of them have climbed to the 6-star tier. Roman turns the rankings over, weighing where the real monsters of this world sit. Since Chris proved 2-star, even Jonathan the 3-star rates as 2nd class to Roman. Hitting 6-star leaves human limits, aura pouring dozens of meters off the blade. 12 people hold that title, treated as VIPs in every nation, called the 12 Swords. Roman figures they got there on wasteful ki, which means they sit at the peak of raw power. Then he flips to the magicians, and one page lays out what the world calls an archmage. A mage at the 7th circle is half man, half god. A walking disaster ready to go off. A single spell from one of them can crack the earth open and split the whole sky. In groups they top 6-star knights, and magic like this never existed back in his Miram. Roman shuts the heavy book, knowing any of these monsters could one day face him. A Dimitry nobody likely won't draw that trouble, but he can't predict it, and that's the risk. He was never the type to spend a whole life hiding safe inside a bubble anyway. He only feels alive chasing new things and ruling it all, and the thought has him grinning. Roman decides it's time to get serious, stepping to a dim stone room behind a barred door. The door creaks open, and Hans appears in the gap, daylight spilling onto the dusty floor. Roman scans the room and says this is the place, Hans standing close behind him. It's an old workshop the Baron once used, locked down so no outsider could slip inside. To Roman, that makes it perfect for training, hidden away from every prying eye. He tells Hans he'll be shut in here a week, wanting no food and nobody let inside. Then he makes Hans swear it. No one comes near unless his own people are in real danger. Hans gulps and gives his word, nervous about leaving the young master alone this long. Roman stands on a floor buried in straw, glancing down at the bedding Hans laid out. He sees Hans piled it here to keep him comfortable through the long stay. He likes the thought, but the straw will throw off his ki flow, so all of it has to go. He sweeps the pile aside until nothing but bare, cold stone is left under him. Then Roman sits cross-legged, palms open on his knees, and closes his eyes. Until now, he kept only the bare minimum of mana in his Dantian, saving the rest for this. To run the Heavenly Demon God art right, he has to clear its very first stage. He starts circulating mana to scrub every trace of impure ki out of this body. His face tightens hard, jaw clenched, as the energy forces its way through him. Blood runs from his mouth as the mana slams into meridians blocked in several spots. This body holds far more filthy ki than a normal young man should, and it fights back hard. He saw it coming, which is why he stockpiled that mana before reaching the human stage. His eyes stay shut and blood keeps dripping, but he's set on getting his old power back fast. Reaching the human stage is the first real step toward that goal, and he sinks deep into it. The bald, bespectacled butler asks them to wait while he fetches tea and snacks. The guests are Viscount Lawrence and his daughter Flora, both blonde high nobles. The Viscount asks where Roman is, and the butler says the young master is busy. The butler bows out, and the two are left standing alone in the empty, silent room. The Viscount sighs that even on a whim visit, the Dimitrys clearly don't want them here. Figuring they must wait, he tells Flora to sit down, and she quietly agrees. He says her name, and Flora answers her father softly, already on edge. He warns her this meeting is meant to undo their mistake, so she should watch every word. His mind drags back to the day he learned Flora had already announced the broken engagement. She had told him plainly she couldn't marry a man she didn't respect, his will or not. The Viscount had roared her name, stunned his own daughter would pull something like this. He had dragged a hand down his face, saying he always thought her a bright, sensible child. Then he spelled it out that the Barco family had borrowed a fortune from the gold bank. To him, that meant one thing only, that the Barcos were gearing up for open war. The Dimitry marriage was the one move that mattered, the lone house that could face the Barcos. Flora pushed back that the Lawrences aren't weak, so maybe they had a shot on their own. The Viscount sighed that against the Barcos alone, sure, but the rot ran far deeper. The government stamped the loan with no check, and the bank gave gold with no collateral. To him, that proved the whole thing had grown into a war the Lawrences simply cannot win. With a cause to wave around, the backers would seize all they own, down to Flora herself. Flora, the so-called flower of Lawrence, had sat there with tears welling as it all landed. Back in the present, her gloved hands clench her skirt as the whole memory keeps replaying. She knew their territory's state and just what her father weighed when he made the call. She knew it all and ignored it for selfish reasons, and now vows to stop being a bargaining flower. Hans paces the grass out front, fretting over what to do and when the master will appear. The pair has waited since morning, it's already sunset, and they looked plenty annoyed, but Roman flatly banned any visits, which leaves poor Hans stuck and second-guessing himself. He creeps up to the barred door, chewing his lip when a faint sound slips out from inside. As Hans calls out to ask if the young master is alright, one word answers from within, "Done." Hans freezes, eyes blown wide and jaw dropping, and chokes out a stunned young master at the sight. Warm sunset light pours through the tall windows of a quiet Dimitry sitting room. Viscount Lawrence sits stiff on the couch, already braced for the cold treatment. He blames it on Flora, his daughter, the one who broke the engagement in the first place. Still, he knows the Lawrences need this marriage badly to survive. His gloved hands clench tight on his knees as the frustration builds. Something snaps behind his eyes and his whole face goes tight. This isn't right. He shoots to his feet and Flora startles, calling out for her father. The Viscount decides he'll go find Baron Dimitry himself instead of waiting around. In his study, Baron Dimitry sits writing a letter quietly by hand. Heavy footsteps come pounding up to his door from down the hall. The Viscount throws the doors wide open and bellows the Baron's name. He rages about the long wait, snapping that the Baron could have just told them to leave. Baron Dimitry only stares back, saying nothing at all at first. He dips his pen in ink and calmly asks if today's meeting was ever actually scheduled. The Viscount admits the visit was sudden, but says they asked to meet a week ago and got refused. The Baron asks how he could ever turn away a guest like the Viscount at the door. Then his voice drops low. Is whining about half a day's wait really all he came here to say? The Viscount freezes and Flora's eyes go wide on the couch beside him. The Baron reminds him that Roman himself was the one who asked to break this engagement off. He scolded his son for it, sure, but a child could see whose choice it really was. The Baron knew Flora drove the breakup, yet never blamed the Lawrences since Roman wanted it left quiet. He says he bit his tongue and let the one-sided breakup notice slide like a fool. The ones who wanted out were the Lawrences, and now the Viscount stands here lecturing him. His fist presses flat against the desk as he names the real insult here, scolding the Baron over an unscheduled meeting while forgetting their own glaring mistakes. The words land hard, and both guests turn pale at the sheer nerve of it. Then the Baron drops the real blow. A month ago, the Barco family quietly reached out to him. A match with the Barcos would have handed Dimitry a government connection and a slice of Lawrence land. He turned that down and asked if the Viscount even knows why he would refuse the better deal. The Viscount has no answer at all, sweat sliding down the side of his face. The Baron says it plainly. The Dimitry house already holds more than enough power. He chose what he truly wanted because his eldest son adores the Lady of Lawrence. For that alone, he took on a war with the Barcos, and now the Viscount sees his prideful blunder. The Baron leans back, almost amused. The flower of Lawrence and the fool of Dimitry never matched, but the Dimitry name changes everything. The moment it sits on Roman, his worth jumps. The truly desperate party here is the Lawrences, not the Dimitrys, and the Baron asks if he's wrong. Flora's hands clench in her lap as an old buried memory suddenly rises back up. She thinks back to her childhood at the academy built for the great noble families. Young Flora sat among the children of the high houses, studying her lessons. One classmate came from a fallen northern house that barely existed anymore. That boy was Joel, an odd one out among kids who all believed themselves treasures. Joel never fit in. Then one day, a sharp crash rang out across the whole classroom. He had made one small mistake, a shattered vase, the kind other nobles always shrugged off. For that alone, Joel got dragged in front of a full disciplinary committee. The teachers tore into him until a man who looked like his father bowed and apologized. He begged forgiveness and swore to punish his son, while other kids smirked through the glass. Watching from the back row, young Flora held a single quiet thought. She had pitied that boy back then. Looking at it now, that pity feels almost laughable. As Lord of Lawrence, her father admits he has nothing left to argue. He bows his head and calls his own daughter's choice a foolish, immature mistake. The Viscount bends low and apologizes for the disrespect, weak now just as Joel once was. Flora lowers her head too and starts her apology because the weak must bow to the strong. Then a servant cuts in with an announcement. Young Master Roman has arrived. Flora's eye snaps wide as the truth finally hits her far too late. There stands Roman, transformed, his hair now a stark silver white. He looks nothing like the fool they remember, his stare cold and sharp. He walks in calm and steady, then begins to introduce himself to the room. Roman greets his father, who stares stunned and asks if the training is finally done. The Baron sets all that aside and says he summoned him about the Lawrence marriage. Since this whole mess began with Roman's own decision, the Baron leaves the call to him. He'll back whatever choice his son makes, and Roman says he understands the offer fully. Roman knows exactly what joining these two houses together would really signify. With the Barcos threatening Lawrence's safety, the math is simple to him. Dimitri's wealth would shield the Lawrence family from whatever the Barcos throw at them. The Baron asks if he truly still wants it, and Roman admits he once saw the value too, but the day he met Flora, she told him straight that she wanted out of the engagement. She had judged him entirely on rumors of a fool, never once on the actual man. Roman says he wants someone who trusts what they see for themselves, not idle gossip. A faint smile tugs at his mouth as he reaches his final verdict. Both Lawrences brace themselves as Roman finally says exactly what he wants. He wants the broken engagement to stay broken, with no changes at all. Flora came to win him back, and the fool she once threw away just shut the door in her face. Roman finishes his verdict, mouth set, the first word landing cold. Across the table, the Viscount sweats while Flora sits frozen beside him. Roman says it plainly that he wants the broken engagement left broken. The words land flat, and for the Lawrence family, it is finally over. The Viscount knows this marriage was his house's very last card to play. With a public breakup on record, no other family will offer them a match now. His real fear slips out that Dimitry and Barco might one day join hands. He bows deep instead and offers to waive taxes on Dimitri goods as apology. He calls it a small token to a house already rich off the iron mines. The Baron waves it away since Dimitri never weighs coins against his son's future. His one term is simple, that Flora ends it herself and Dimitri stays off Barco's side. The Viscount drops his head low and thanks him, relief plain in his voice. He and Flora bow together, both grateful their family gets to survive. The two Lawrences step out into the long hallway, their visit over. At the threshold, the Viscount glances back, his face tight with regret. Inside the study, Roman stands by the desk while his father stays seated. The Viscount thinks it bitterly, that he should have seen Roman's worth sooner. He wishes he had warned Flora never to make such a rash, sudden call. Walking out, he owns the truth that he made a huge mistake of his own. That leaves Roman alone in the quiet study with his father. The Baron breaks the silence and softly calls him son, and Roman answers. Then comes the real question, what happened to him this past week? Roman thinks back to that week, when he burned the foul energy out of this body. This world runs thick with natural mana, far richer than the land he came from. That mana and the poison in his veins together sparked a strange reaction. His whole frame reshaped itself, hair and all, into a brand new body. He cannot say any of that, so he hands his father a clean cover story. He claims his training woke mana circulation, and the Baron's jaw drops. The Baron knows that gift is born into only a rare handful of people. His old family moron keeps pulling off the impossible since the Blood Fang fight. None of it makes sense to him, yet it changes nothing. This is still his son. He leans in with words he needs Roman to hear, one father to his boy. Whatever hardship comes, he swears he will never look away from his son. He promises to stand behind Roman through anything for as long as he lives. The promise drags up a memory from a life Roman lived long before this one. An old man once stood above him while he knelt beaten in the dirt. That old man stared down and spat a single word at him, pathetic. Back in the present, Roman shuts his eyes against the bitter memory. His father here is the opposite of that, neither cold nor cruel. A father who never pushes his son to the brink of death, and Roman thanks him. A small smile breaks through as he admits this life is not bad at all. Out in the corridor, Roman stops short with a low, surprised hum. Flora is standing there waiting for him, still in her purple gown. She apologizes for judging him too fast and for the mess it caused both houses. Roman tells her to drop it since he never wanted this marriage either. Flora says she gets his anger since she broke their promise one-sided. Still, she wants to come clean with him while the chance is here. She admits there was a real reason she chose to call the engagement off. It all started at a gathering thrown by the northeastern nobles. Once word spread she might wed a Dimitri, her friends fed her dark rumors. One leaned close and whispered that Roman Dimitri was hooked on drugs, the kind of drug that eats away at a person's reason and intelligence. She thought he deserved to know, though she sees now it was all false. Roman listens with a flat stare that slowly turns sharp. He cuts in cold that whatever happened changes nothing between them now. He turns and walks off, telling her to stop worrying about him. Flora stays rooted in place, watching his back shrink down the hall. Night settles over the Dimitri estate, the moon framed in the window. Roman sits with his tea while Hans pours, turning that word over, drugs. He is sure of it, that he feels no drug poisoning this body at all. The only trace was the brew that killed this body, and the change scrubbed it clean. He calls Hans over and asks if the butler ever once saw him touch drugs. Hans nearly chokes, and Roman quickly says it is not a trap or a scolding. He only wants an outside read on the choices his old self used to make. Hans hesitates, then admits there may be one thing worth saying after all. He grips the ledger tighter, working up to his quiet confession. Hans never saw it himself, but Roman did act strange once, and Roman asks when. Half a month back, his old self came home from a noble's party. That part was nothing odd, Hans says, until he saw the shape of him. Roman had come back sweating and rattled, plainly not himself. After that, he locked himself away, the will to live drained out of him. Every night he begged for more wine, the table buried in empty bottles. Hans admits the drug idea sounds idiotic now that he says it out loud, but Flora's warning circles back, and it all traces to one gathering. Roman's eyes go sharp, and he asks Hans who hosted that party. The host turns out to be the Barco heir, a man named Anthony Barco. With the Lawrence marriage looming, Anthony Barco had pulled him in. Right after that party, his old self spiraled and took his own life. Roman sees it now, that whatever shattered the old Roman began at Anthony Barco's table. Roman keeps chewing on one thing about his old self's death. The old Roman left a will, and it only blamed his fear of the coming battle. It also locked in the marriage to Flora, the girl his old self always wanted, and married nobles had plenty of ways to dodge military service anyway. So why would a man with all that just kill himself over a war? Roman asks Hans straight up if he was ever close with Anthony Barco. Hans says nobody spent more time around him than Barco did, but lately the two soured right around the Lawrence marriage talks. That wedding between Lawrence and Dimitry blocked everything the Barcos wanted. Roman figures that pressure is what shoved his old self off the edge. Then Hans brings up the strangest news, that the Barcos sent a party invitation. Roman's head snaps up, asking if the Barcos really invited him. Hans holds up the letter, unsure how he should even handle it. Roman smirks, figuring they're either bold or still think he's a joke. Either way, the whole thing scrapes hard at his nerves. He asks when the party is, and Hans says exactly 2 weeks out. Roman leans back and tells Hans to send the Barcos his answer. Outside, the white Dimitry estate sits quiet under the morning sky. Inside, Hans opens a door and leads a red-haired servant down the hall. He warns the young man not to be shocked by the master's new look. The servant nods, and a heavy door creaks open just ahead of him. Inside, a hand rests on a sheathed sword as the servant steps up. Roman turns his head and asks if that's really him, Kevin. Kevin freezes, stunned by the new face, barely getting the words out. Roman asks if life here treats him well, and Kevin credits Hans for it. But the kid hesitates, a worry plain across his face. Kevin admits he's been lost about what use he could ever be here. He calls himself a pebble. Too plain to do anything for Roman. Roman's mouth curls as he says he already has a use in mind. He wants Kevin as his sword, and that word knocks the wind out of him. Kevin chokes the words back out, stunned, asking if he heard sword right. Roman lifts a hand and says nobody else gets to decide your worth. So he lays out 3 paths to choose from, and the first drops the blade. Kevin could shadow Hans and handle the safe, quiet work instead. The second path turns him into Roman's sword and personal shield. Kevin stammers that he's never once held a blade in his whole life. Roman says he'll test that resolve with a method called skeletal contortion. It causes pain so deep the bones and muscles feel like they're warping. Kevin swallows hard, the sweat already running down his face. Then Roman raises the sheathed sword for the third and final choice. He tells Kevin to take that blade and cut his own hand clean off. If Kevin can endure the pain he puts on himself all the way through, then he'll grow stronger faster than anyone else alive. Roman points to the mad demon, a stray who knew nothing of martial arts, that nobody clawed up to one of the 4 heavenly kings on will alone. Roman drops the sword at his feet and says the choice is Kevin's now. The story rewinds to a broken down shack that could fall any second. Kevin was born there, a crying baby in a poor family's arms. From a young age he worked just to survive, hauling wood beside his father. He picked up every skill he could until little was left he couldn't do. But no matter how hard he tried, someone bigger always took it away. That was the life of the weak, and it left him bloodied and beaten. Then he watched a man unleash a strength he could never forget. Back now, Kevin grips the blade, lost on how losing a hand helps. But if it drags him out of a life that steals everything he wants in. Kevin locks his jaw and makes the call. He'll do it. Roman just watches in silence, that faint smirk never leaving his mouth. Kevin grabs the hilt and lifts the blade high over his head. With a scream, he swings the whole thing straight down. The edge drops toward his own wrist, pinned on the ground. Kevin's eyes roll white, his face twisting through the pain. Roman's eye snaps wide as the blood starts to fly. Across the estate, a pair of boots strides over the stone floor. A blonde knight grumbles that the master vanished into training out of nowhere. He spots Hans down the hall with a basin and calls out to him. Hans greets him as Vice Captain Chris, who asks where the master is. Chris frowns and asks who in the world this Kevin even is. The answer is a blade soaked red and dripping with fresh blood. A bloodied hand hits the dirt as the sword clatters down beside it. Kevin's eye bulges wide, a raw scream tearing out of him. Across the yard, Roman just stands there, hands tucked in his pockets. Then Kevin's body tips backward and crashes to the ground. Roman looks down at him, calm as ever, not a flicker on his face. Hans bursts in with the bloody sword, panicking that Roman is hurt. Roman waves it off, telling the old butler it's nothing to worry about. Then he smirks and says the easy part. The blood isn't even his. Right as Kevin swung, Roman had already dropped him into an illusion, but Kevin gashed his own wrist before the illusion pulled him under. Roman calls him a vicious kid, a weaker spell, and the whole hand was gone. Elsewhere in the estate, Chris lies back in bed 2 weeks before the party. Kevin sits by a window, his wrist wrapped 6 months out from the war. Roman grins wide, plenty to teach, and he's about to get very busy. Roman warns that the technique he's about to teach is a dangerous one. Kevin asks if he's really getting taught a mana cultivation art, and Roman nods. Roman admits it isn't mana at all, but an old martial art from the cult vaults. The art is called the demonic spirit art, and it eats away at the user's mind. Even with his limbs hacked off, the user must not lose his mind to the pain. Roman figures a kid willing to sever his own hand can handle the rising pain. He calls it the fastest road for a mana-less teen to guard the people he loves. Kevin is stunned. Roman saved him, crushed Blood Fang, and now hands him this art. For a beat, nobody speaks. Then Kevin quietly starts with a soft young master. Kevin says he can't put his gratitude into words. Then comes the heavy butt. Out in the yard, Kevin asks the real question. Why does Roman trust him at all? Kevin swore his life yet proved nothing, and he might bolt once he learns this. He just wants to know what makes a master believe in him this much. Roman gives him a grin and 2 flat words. Just because. Kevin blinks and repeats it right back. Just because. Roman waves it off and says, training starts tomorrow, so go rest up. Alone, Roman chews on it. Real trust only forms once you truly believe in someone. His eyes settle on Kevin across the yard. This one will never betray him, because the stronger Kevin grows, the more he grasps how dangerous betrayal is. To betray the heavenly demon, that shadow looms behind Roman in the dark. The next morning, the estate towers catch the early light. A pair of wrapped hands locks tight around a wooden sword's grip. Kevin swings at the post as Roman drills the basics behind every move. Each motion has to be clean, Roman says, and Kevin can't let his focus slip. Kevin barks back a sharp yes and keeps grinding through the drill. Off to the side, Chris the blonde knight lets out a huge bored yawn. He slumps on a crate, completely lost. None of this makes sense to him. He can't see why Roman drills the odd kid in swordplay yet teaches him nothing. Chris joined to grow strong fast, but now he's treated like he isn't even there. He'd gain more beside his old master, and he weighs just begging to go back. For a moment, Chris stares up, torn between his pride and his doubt. He decides to swallow it and wait just a little longer. Day after day, he sits on that crate, watching the training drag on. Then his patience snaps. His glove balls up as he mutters, "Screw this." Chris marches up behind Roman and calls out to the young master. He points out it's been over 2 weeks since he chose to follow Roman. The first week vanished while Roman buried himself in his own training. The next week he sat sidelined while Kevin trained, so he apologizes for the rudeness. He begs Roman to teach him too. Sure, he can pick up whatever he's shown. Roman reminds him to just learn by watching, and Chris blinks at how literal that is. Roman tells them flatly that everyone has their own way of learning. Kevin knows nothing yet, so Roman has to guide him from start to finish. Chris is different, since he'd only force himself to obey the man who beat him. Chris asks if he should just keep watching, and Roman lifts a wooden sword. No? The blade flies over and smacks against Chris's cheek before he grabs it. He stammers about the wooden toy, and Roman says, results are what make truth stick. Roman drops the offer, a proxy duel against Kevin, and both heads snap up. Kevin fights as the body while Roman feeds the moves, a stand-in for himself. If Chris still thinks he's right after this, Roman will finally train him in person. Chris balks at a duel with a novice, while Kevin balks at facing a real knight. Chris's grip tightens hard. He fumes over what Roman takes him for. He agrees on the spot, set on proving he's no pushover right here. They take their spots in the yard. Kevin and Chris squared off as Roman watches. Kevin frets about a 2-star knight. Roman asks what losing here would cost him. Nothing. Roman reminds him the world is packed with people stronger than he is. Roman says Blood Fang and Chris are no different, both there to beat Kevin down. That lands. Kevin sets his jaw and says he'll give it a shot. Chris seethes at fighting a novice, then catches the odd confidence in Kevin's eyes. Roman means to tame him with this match and tells them both to get ready. Chris narrows his eyes. Proxy duel or not, he's done holding back. On Roman's begin, Chris bolts in and swings the wooden blade straight down. Kevin gets his sword up in time, and Chris scoffs at a 1-week newbie. Kevin's eyes lock in, reading every shift of the knight's footing. The two wooden blades crack together hard enough to spit splinters. They trade a quick flurry, swords slamming back and forth across the stone. Then Chris breaks through and sends Kevin stumbling off his balance. Chris presses the chase, driving Kevin back across the open yard. A clean hit drops Kevin onto the stone, and he chokes out a pained grunt. Chris frowns. The kid feels way too weak for all of that buildup. He expected Roman to have a trick, yet the man just stands there doing nothing. Chris can't read the plan, so he and Kevin reset for another clash. He lunges again, set on ending the whole thing with one last strike. Roman just watches it unfold, the faint smile never leaving him. Chris's fist crashes in and lands flush, the impact bursting on contact. Kevin's head snaps sideways, blood spraying from his mouth with a sharp cry. His hand splays out flat against the cold stone floor. Kevin drops to his knees, leaning on the sword as Chris towers above him. Chris admits the kid lasted longer than expected for someone with no mana, but he tells Kevin to quit since he never once went all out in this fight. Chris says he could have split the kid's skull at will, but the duel held him back. His eyes go cold as he gives one final warning. He warns that if Kevin keeps fighting, he'll lose a limb for good. Kevin answers with a wet, broken chuckle through his bloody grin. His laugh rolls louder. Roman's eye gleams while Chris stares. Thrown off, battered and grinning, Kevin grips his sword and tells Chris to see this to the end. Chris fixes his eyes forward as the call goes out to get ready. Kevin sets his stance, sweat dripping as a voice says to guard his front. The voice warns of a surprise attack from Chris, and Kevin's eyes snap wide. On the call to begin, Chris bursts in and swings his blade at the kid. Kevin blocks the strike and grunts as the voice says to step one pace aside. It tells him to aim for Chris's chest the second the knight throws a kick. Kevin shifts his footing and mutters the order back, trying to follow it, but the knight is faster, and Chris slams in before the move ever lands. Kevin gets thrown off balance, his body sliding back across the stone. He crashes onto his back, coughing, the wooden sword still in his grip. Kevin groans on the ground, and the young master's voice tells him to get up. He knows that voice at once. It belongs to the young master, Roman. Roman explains it is sound conduction, words carried on mana to feed live orders. Kevin can barely believe it, repeating the strange word as the duel rolls on. He wonders if mana can really do even this. Then Roman says to dive right. Kevin hurls his body aside and reaches out just as the knight closes in. Chris's eye catches the motion, and Roman is already calling the turn. Then the order finishes, aims straight for the knight's left chest. Kevin twists his hips and drives the wooden sword at the knight's body. Chris reads it and snaps a kick in, knocking the smaller fighter away. The two break apart, standing at opposite ends of the wide stone yard. Kevin clutches his side, sure the knight had been wide open for that hit, but his strike came too slow, and Roman snaps a command to block above. Kevin throws the sword overhead and stops Chris's heavy chop in time. Roman calls again, telling him to escape right as the blades grind together. Kevin spins away, yet Chris's next blow throws him off his feet. He hits the ground again and clenches his jaw through the pain. Chris frowns through his sweat. By every measure, this kid is no match for him. Roman watches calmly, noting that Kevin's body can't match his commands. Kevin stands panting as Chris wonders if this duel is starting to feel fun. His lips pull up at the corner, and he quietly calls the whole thing amusing. To Kevin, the young master Roman looks untouchable, his arms calmly crossed. A full 2-star knight stands against him, yet Kevin keeps swinging. His own body moves exactly the way Roman tells him to move. The real trouble is Kevin's body, since a clean copy of the plan wins already. To Kevin, Roman works Chris like a puppet on strings, just toying with him. Roman feeds the next step, telling him to pivot to the right. Then comes the rest, charge forward and turn it into a counterattack. Chris's eye snaps wide as the kid drives in faster than before. A fist crashes into Kevin's cheek and rocks his head sideways. Chris can't grasp it. Each killing blow gets slipped and the kid fires back. Kevin knows better. No genius like Chris matches the master he serves for life. Eyeing Roman's back, Kevin swears to follow every word, even the senseless ones. His grip tightens. To be Roman's blade, the only answer is is raw willpower. Kevin hauls the sword overhead and throws himself forward with all he has. His charge tears across the courtyard, dust kicking up under his boots. Blood runs over his grin as he closes the gap on the knight. Chris's eyes go cold as he tells the kid he will say this once. He warns that if Kevin keeps coming, he should accept losing a limb. Kevin answers with a wet, broken chuckle through the blood on his lips. His laugh swells, and Roman's eye glints while Chris holds his guard up. Battered and bleeding, Kevin lifts his sword and tells Chris to end this. Chris just stares at him, the single word you caught in his throat. Then fury takes his face and he calls the kid an insignificant insect. Chris charges in and shouts that he will give the kid what he wants. He aims for the arm, telling Kevin to watch it get crippled. Kevin's eye fixes on the incoming blade without flinching back. Roman's command lands, a single word telling him to step into the swing. Chris's heavy chop comes down while Kevin pushes straight toward him. Kevin grits through the blood and answers the order. Attack with Chris's eyes widen as the kid pours all his might into the blow. Kevin's wooden sword rips through the air in a huge, wide arc. Across the yard, the two blur together, the kid lunging at the knight. Chris is stunned the kid stepped in, and Roman quietly says it is not over yet. Roman's next words reach Kevin, telling him to turn around right now. Then the last piece drops, charge, and Kevin throws his body into it. Kevin barrels straight at the knight with the sword cocked back. Chris scoffs that a swing this big and slow could never land, calling him open, but the taunt cuts off as his eye snaps to the opening he missed. Kevin ducks under the swing and slips clean inside the knight's reach. With a sharp grunt, Kevin drives upward, and Chris's eye goes wide. The wooden blade sweeps up in a glowing arc as Kevin roars with effort. Roman lets a faint smile through as Kevin's bloodied eye finds the target. Chris's jaw drops as the hit comes from an angle he never covered. The sword cracks home, and Chris buckles down onto one knee, but his eye flares with fury, refusing to fold here. He whips back with a savage counter that blasts Kevin off his feet. As the dust clears, Chris finds Roman leaning calm against the wall. Chris finally sees it. The kid swung to bait the duck, and his raid was wrong. Across the stone, Kevin lies flat on his back, completely spent. Chris breathes a curse, calls the plan vicious, then admits the master won. Roman walks over and offers, as promised, to train Chris himself tomorrow. He lifts the knocked out Kevin into his arms and says the choice is Chris's. Later, behind the closed door of his room, Chris lets out a tired breath. He peels off his vest and tosses it onto the bed. Chris stands alone in the quiet room, asking why he agreed to that duel. There was nothing to gain from that win. He wasted time and nearly lost. That final trick nags at him, just like his first duel against Roman. It is the match he has replayed in his head hundreds of times since. Chris wonders if, without Roman, he could have beaten Kevin with no mana. The question drags a quiet laugh out of him. He scans the empty room and asks if one single fight really made him grow. Out under the open sky, Roman asks Chris what he plans to do now. Chris faces him and answers that he needs no formal teachings. Instead, he says he will find his own path to strength by following Roman. One duel changed him. Every move Kevin made was right, each one fed by Roman. On a crate, Chris sees those calls filled his head with lessons, and the master is no fool now. Watching Roman with Kevin, Chris grants he has passed a level even Captain Jonathan can't reach. Chris sets his jaw and swears that until he surpasses Roman, he will learn it all by watching. Roman glances over as Chris hauls up a barrel and opens with two words, "Well then." He grins and tells him to get straight back to training. A towering estate opens its gates for the gathering, a whole new stage for Roman. If you made it this far, subscribe and drop a comment, and I'll see you in the next one.